A reporter asked Alysa Liu a simple question in the middle of the chaos of Milano Cortina 2026, and the answer she gave stopped the internet completely cold. If you could swap lives with any Olympian for 24 hours, who is your pick? That was the question, thrown at a two-time gold medalist standing at the absolute pinnacle of her sport. She could have named anyone on the planet, a sprinter, a skier, a gymnast, someone from a completely different world. She did not hesitate for even 1 second. Chloe Kim, she said, zero hesitation, no humming or hedging, no media-trained deflection toward a diplomatic non-answer that protects her brand and offends nobody. Then she dropped the reasoning, and it was the most authentically human sentence spoken by any athlete during the entire 2 weeks of competition in Italy. I just want to know what it feels like to shred like that. That is the tweet, that is the whole answer, raw and real and completely unfiltered by anyone whose job it is to manage her public image. To understand why that moment hit the internet the way it did, you have to first understand what Alysa Liu actually just accomplished on Italian ice before she sat down for that interview. She is 20 years old, and she just became the first American woman to win individual gold in figure skating since Sarah Hughes did it in 2002. A 24-year drought ended by a kid barely out of her teens. Sasha Cohen, Michelle Kwan, Mirai Nagasu, Ashley Wagner, legends who dedicated their entire lives to the sport, who left everything on the ice at multiple Olympics, and that top step kept slipping away from every single one of them. She walked into Italy and shattered that curse with a program that stopped looking like a sport halfway through and started feeling like high art. Clean landings, raw emotion, 4 minutes of something that made people put down their phones. She also anchored Team USA to gold in the team event earlier in the Games, which means she left Italy with 2 gold medals at 20 years old on the sport's biggest stage. She handled the media circus and the weight of 2 decades of American skating expectation with a composure that veterans twice her age rarely manage under a fraction of the pressure she was carrying. Then you have Chloe Kim, and the specific nature of what she pulled off in Milan is the context that makes Alyssa's answer land with the weight that it does. Kim has been the undisputed queen of the halfpipe for nearly a decade. Gold at Pyeongchang 2018 at 17 years old, defended the title in Beijing 2022, left the snowboarding world speechless both times. Nobody doubted her skill going into these games. The only question was her body. And that question had an answer that the hype cycle almost completely buried before the competition even began. She rode the entire Games with a dislocated shoulder. She had wrecked it in training right before the opening ceremony, in a fall that would have been a pack-up-and-go-home situation for 99% of professional athletes. Kim suited up, dropped into the pipe with a broken body, and rode her way to silver, which was not a defeat. That was a warrior proving she is the second-best snowboarder on Earth, even on her absolute worst day. One slip in a halfpipe is not a mistake, it is a catastrophe, and she competed through that risk with a dislocated shoulder in blinding Olympic lights in front of the entire watching world without flinching once. What she pulled off in Italy did not just add another medal to an already legendary resume, it transformed her from a dominant champion into something that occupies a completely different category of athletic story. Being great when you're healthy is the baseline expectation for an Olympic champion. Being great when your body is broken under maximum pressure is the thing that turns athletes into permanent cultural reference points. The buzz around her was not limited to the competition results because her presence at the Games created a crossover moment that pulled an entirely different audience into the orbit of the Winter Olympics. Her relationship with NFL star Myles Garrett became the story that ran parallel to the athletic results, a defensive nightmare on the gridiron, spending his week as her personal hype man on the sidelines of the halfpipe. Die-hard football fans who could not identify a halfpipe from any other piece of snow infrastructure were suddenly watching because of that connection, which is exactly the kind of crossover the Olympics needs to reach audiences it does not normally touch. By the closing ceremony, she had crossed into mainstream superstardom in a way that very few athletes ever achieve, regardless of how dominant they are within the boundaries of their own sport.
Back to Alysa Liu's answer and why it resonated so far beyond the surface level of an athlete complimenting a teammate in a magazine interview. We tend to think elite athletes exist on isolated islands, locked inside their own intense competitive bubbles, too consumed by their own preparation and pressure to genuinely watch and appreciate what is happening around them. That assumption is wrong. They are watching. They are fans. They scroll feeds and scream in stands and geek out over greatness exactly the way everyone else does, just from a closer vantage point with more context. Here is a 20-year-old woman with 2 Olympic gold medals fresh around her neck, standing at the peak of her own sport, watching Chloe Kim hurl herself down a pipe with a dislocated shoulder and thinking she needs to feel that. That is not media training. That is not a calculated answer designed to make her look humble and relatable. That is a real person watching a real person do something extraordinary and responding with genuine awe. The fact that the response was immediate, unfiltered, and simple rather than polished and layered is the entire point. That is what authentic admiration looks like when it's not processed through a public relations filter first.
Alysa was far from alone in her answer, which adds another layer to what the moment reveals about the culture inside Team USA at these particular games. Multiple athletes pointed toward Chloe Kim when asked the same question, not because it was the safe or expected answer, but because they were all watching the same thing unfold in real time and feeling the same thing. The athletes who did not pick Chloe largely pointed toward Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast in history, 4 Olympic gold medals, a legacy of resilience and mental health advocacy that genuinely changed the trajectory of professional sport. The fact that Olympians dream of walking in Simone Biles' shoes tells you exactly how high she sits on any reasonable hierarchy of athletic greatness. She is in a category that operates above the normal conversation entirely. But the Chloe Kim responses hit differently because Chloe is doing it right now, in real time, creating moments in the current moment that her peers are witnessing from the same building under the same pressure. This is sports culture operating at its absolute peak, not rivalry, not politics, not territorial protection of individual brands, just unadulterated admiration between elite athletes who recognize greatness when they are standing next to it. The numbers behind the American women's performance at these games need to be stated plainly because the cultural moment around Alysa and Chloe exists inside a historic collective achievement that reframes the entire picture. Team USA finished Milano Cortina 2026 with 33 total medals, 12 gold, 12 silver, 9 bronze, and 21 of those 33 medals were won by women, including in mixed events. 8 of the 12 American gold medals were delivered by female athletes, 8 out of 12, which means the women of Team USA on their own matched the total gold medal output of Germany, Sweden, and France individually. One gender from one nation equaling the gold medal production of entire countries fielding complete rosters across every discipline. That is not just winning at an Olympic Games. That is the definition of a dynasty operating at full capacity. These were not lucky breaks or flukes on a sunny day in a forgiving competitive field. These were victories forged through years of sacrifice, delivered when the pressure was at its absolute maximum, with everything on the line. Some of these athletes did not just reach the podium, they became household names who crossed from the category of elite athlete into the category of cultural icon during the 2 weeks they spent competing in northern Italy. The real legacy of Milano Cortina 2026 for Team USA is not contained in the medal count or the broken records or the viral clips that will be replayed in highlight packages for the next decade. It lives in the next generation, the 10-year-old girl watching an Alysa Liu clip who decides in that specific moment that she belongs on the ice and that the gap between her and that level is crossable. It lives in the kid who watched Chloe Kim drop into a halfpipe with a dislocated shoulder and understood in her bones that physical obstacles are not permanent barriers when the competitive will is strong enough.
That combination of grace and grit, visible in the same 2-week window, delivered by women who are also publicly fangirling over each other rather than competing for cultural space, is the thing that builds the next generation of champions. Alysa Liu standing there with gold around her neck and saying she just wants to know what it feels like to shred like Chloe Kim is the message every young athlete needs to hear from someone at that level. The titans of sport are still fans at heart. They still watch. They still feel awe. They still chase the feeling of something they have not yet experienced, and that humanity is what makes the greatness accessible rather than distant. The crossover between Alysa's answer and what Chloe actually represented at these games is the thread that ties the entire American women's story at Milano Cortina together into something more coherent than a medal count. Both women carried the weight of enormous expectations into Italy. Alysa as the athlete expected to end 2 decades of American drought. Chloe as the returning champion, defending a legacy built across 2 previous Olympic cycles. Both delivered under circumstances that would have broken athletes with less psychological fortitude. Alysa ending the drought on a program she designed on her own terms, after walking away from the sport entirely. Chloe competing through a physical injury that had no business being managed on an Olympic stage. Both became defining faces of the Games for reasons that extended beyond the technical results. Alysa for the joy and authenticity she radiated throughout, Chloe for the warrior narrative that unfolded alongside the halfpipe competition. And then they became connected through a single unscripted moment in a magazine interview, where the figure skater with 2 gold medals said without hesitation that she just wants to know what it feels like to ride like the snowboarder with the broken shoulder. That is the soul of what sports at this level is supposed to look like when the cameras catch something real. 2 extraordinary people operating at the peak of human achievement who still find ways to be genuinely amazed by each other. The question nobody has thought to ask yet is the natural flip side of the one that generated all of this, and it is the one that deserves an answer before the conversation about these games closes. Ask Chloe Kim the same question. If you could swap lives with any Olympian for 24 hours, who do you pick and why? And the answer tells you as much about her as Alysa's answer told you about her. Does she say Alysa Liu? Does she want to feel the specific pressure of landing a quad jump in a packed arena in front of Olympic judges with a 24-year national drought riding on 4 minutes of ice? Does she go with Simone Biles, like the majority of elite athletes who were asked the same question, acknowledging the specific gravity of what the greatest gymnast in history has built and endured and overcome? Or does she throw a wild card that reveals something unexpected about what she was watching from her perspective during those 2 weeks when the rest of the world was watching her? That answer matters because sports at this level is a conversation between extraordinary people, and the conversation between Alysa Liu and Chloe Kim at Milano Cortina 2026 is one that the next generation of athletes is going to be studying for years.